It's 30 minutes to 6 o'clock. Gather around, it's confession time. If you have a confession, we would like to tempt you to send it to us. confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. That is the email address. Just some words of assistance, which often come your way on a Monday due to the mass reading that takes place over the weekend. First of all, one paragraph is too short. And,
Yes.
you know, a couple of sentences doesn't really help.
No.
Secondly, 8 pages is too long.
Yes.
Because we haven't got time to read all that. There might be a good story in there somewhere, but you need an editor's pencil. Page and a half is fine. First of all, and thirdly, it's a family show. Okay? With a family audience.
Yeah.
And so bear that in mind as you're sending it in. Next point, people are eating at this time.
Yes.
Okay? Also, no law breaking and no laxatives, which I
Yeah.
mentioned before. But anyway,
Yeah.
I'm just helping you get a smart speaker.
Yeah.
Really. Today's comes from Mandy. Mandy's fits all the rules. Father Simon and the Collective. My confession dates back to the early 90s. No social media, no dating apps. If you wanted to find love, you went to the nightclub. I realised there are probably other places. A friend of mine found love at the fishmongers. But for me,
Wow.
imagine that.
Yes. No, I can.
But for me and my crowd, the nightclub seemed to do the trick, and you didn't come home smelling of fish. It was a Friday night, and my brother, Daz, 6 years my junior, rang me, begging me to go clubbing with him. Whether he'd been let down by a date or was simply Billy No Mates, I can't remember, although the two are often connected when it comes to Daz. I was the mother of a toddler, so could think of nothing that I would enjoy less. My idea of a grand time was a night watching ER and the X-Files, a tub of Ben & Jerry's and lights out by 10.
It was the 90s.
A party girl I was not. But anyway, after much begging on his part, I finally agreed to go with him. As long as he promised me faithfully he would not leave me on my own. He agreed, so off we went. Club was packed. Typical Friday night. My brother, ever the gentleman, went off to the bar to get our drinks. He did not return. I sat there. The DJ played 2 Unlimited and Hadaway. Another dross that I hold you, Father Simon, personally responsible for. But still, my brother didn't show. I think it was more of a Pete Tong thing, actually.
Okay.
But anyway, yes, we did play Hadaway and 2 Unlimited back in the day. Feeling abandoned and somewhat annoyed. Thank you. Breaker 19, it's Rubber Duck. Got a copy on me, Big Ben? Come on. Sorry about that. Where was I? Feeling abandoned and somewhat annoyed, I set off through the crowded club to try and find my wayward brother. Finally, I clocked him on the dance floor with a young lady. She wasn't wearing much, to be honest, but I can vouch for the pants. She was at least. I can confirm she was definitely wearing those at least.
Good.
They were dancing so close to each other you couldn't get a credit card between them. They paused their smooching momentarily to reach over to a table and sip their drinks. Yes, their drinks. He had been to the bar. One of those drinks was mine. Well, he was having a good evening. I, on the other hand, was not. I was hot, bothered, and thirsty. No drink and no company. Saw red, marched across the dance floor, tapped my brother on the shoulder. Oi! Turns around. So this is where you are, I shrieked. So this is where you are!
Oh, good. We're going down the Monty Python route, are we?
I don't care! I don't care what you do or who you do it with, but when you promise our twins that you'll be home to read them a bedtime story and you don't come home, well, enough is enough. Thank you, Terry Jones. Anyway,
Yes.
well, the young lady was understandably taken aback by the revelation that her charming dance partner was in fact a 2-timing gigolo and took a step back. My brother was doing his best to explain that I was in fact his sister. Sister, I said. Sister. I knew the age gap would be a problem. I continued. Young Julie and Jason are crying themselves to sleep right now, you heartless, good-for-nothing pig.
Excellent.
Well, then the young lady had had enough. She flounced off the dance floor, leaving my brother standing alone with the eyes of everyone looking accusingly at him. You see, you could see the judgment in their eyes. It was a wonderful thing. Father Simon, I'm not seeking forgiveness for my brother Jez, even though he often recounts the evening and says, she could have been the one. She could have been the one. Well, he broke his promise and he abandoned me. So I seek forgiveness, Father Simon, from the young lady on the dance floor whose evening was ruined. I hope she learned to love again. I mean, I think that's overstating it. They didn't be together like 10 minutes.
I think so.
Anyway, thank you, and I hope that you can all forgive me. Well, let's just check in and see if we can indeed forgive young Mandy for a torrid tale from the nightclub. She knew her brother Jez would let her down, and Jez did just that. Sister Susie, from the pub.
Mandy, I think, I don't think it's on. Your brother was not, he should have got you a drink. He shouldn't have abandoned you. But also, what did you expect when you're going out with your brother? Surely he's done it before. Surely you should know. However, I just think it's hilarious making think that you've got twins at home. So for that reason, I'll forgive you.
Okay, all right. It was quite a nice trick. Brother Matthew.
So I'm going to forgive Mandy, even though at the start of this confession, she unaccountably called her brother Daz, and then he became Jez for some reason.
You need to change these things around.
Do you?
He could, yes, he could, because sometimes it depends who he's with.
Oh, I see.
He has to change his name
then
in
Jez.
case. Yeah,
because he's like Clark Kent. Definitely going to forgive. If for nothing else than the involvement of CB Radio in this confession, which was completely unexpected. The greatest hits CB Radio making an appearance. So yes, definitely forgiven.
You're a pushover, aren't you?
Yeah.
Really? Okay, it's the people's verdict. Please, do you forgive Mandy? Yes or no? On the text 61054. And how will I know? It's 10 minutes past 6. Confession time. The email is confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Today's came from Mandy, whose brother was either called Daz or Jez or Bozza or one of them. But basically, younger brother convinced sister to go to the nightclub with him, said, just stay there, I'll go and get you a drink, and then was distracted by another lady and never turned up. And so she took her revenge by finding him on the dance floor with a young woman and pretending to be his other half and saying that they had twins at home. Anyway, hilarity ensued at the dance floor. Let's see what the people's verdict is like this with Matthew.
So Jill says, definitely forgiven. Hilarious. Almost sliced my fingers cutting the onions because I was laughing so much. Harvey, not forgiven. As frustrated as she was, what if he was about to meet the love of his life?
Well, that's what he says.
Yes, indeed. And Carmen in Cardiff says, forgiven, but you are not forgiven, Simon, for missing the perfect opportunity to play the classic 2 Unlimited, no, there's no limits.
Well, I think that's the reason why I didn't.
You didn't play that?
No, I don't think so. I think there were many people that say, you know what, the good old days when two Unlimited were on the radio all the time. Malt loaf munches, says Misty, and I think malt loaf, I've never bought malt loaf, but every time I have it, it's great. So why haven't I had more malt loaf? Could you sort that out, Matt?
Well, I'll sort that out. Yes, I've no idea. I mean,
do you not?
Well, I mean, clearly you're passing by in the supermarket, aren't you, and just not going for your malt loaf. Do you not partake of the malt loaf? No.
It's nice, a bit of butter on it.
See, is it?
The thing is, we're desperate. We're all desperately hungry, so we just want to talk about food. We've been reduced, I have to say, to eating fruit. That's how bad it is. Dear. I mean, I know a banana is nature's Twix, but it somehow doesn't quite cut it anymore. Send us your confession. If we use it, you get a smart speaker. We would love to hear it. It has its own email address, confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Standing by for the people's verdict on tonight's confession, which comes from Nora. Thank you, Nora. Father Simon and the Confessional Collective. This is a confession that goes all the way back to 1957.
Wow.
Positively olden times. Sterling Moss, Andy Capp, rock and roll, Anthony Eden, Harold Macmillan. Gunfight at the OK Corral is at the movies, and who knows what was on TV, because we didn't have one. Was that Burt Lancaster?
Gunfight at the OK Corral, I think so, yeah.
Kirk Douglas. Anyway, irrelevant for actually. It's just placing us in 1957. What we did have, though, was a domestic incident. Our front doorstep was in a bit of a state. For some reason, it was turning and changing colour. From a rather distinguished slate grey to a rather disgusting, suspiciously yellow colour. It was getting worse. No matter how regularly it was cleaned, it was yellower and yellower and yellower. You know the way people used to get nicotine fingers?
Oh, dear.
It was like that. My mother would hide by the curtains waiting to see who the offender was. Everyone who walked down our street, even the Reverend Matthews, was suspected. and Major Alderton. They were peered at with deep suspicion. Quite why they would want to discolour our step was not the issue. She was obsessed with who the culprit was. Meanwhile, the stain kept spreading. She was obviously missing something. My mother became convinced that our neighbours, the Roonies, were the offenders. This was because one, they were generally a poor sort, ruffians really.
I see.
They had a suspicious look about them. I know you shouldn't judge people by the way they look, but you could back then. And
but you could back then, right?
You could.
and you could just tell. You could tell they were up to no good.
Right, I see.
More precisely, second reason, their black Labrador, Tanker, was a hooligan dog and poorly trained. Prone to humping any passing stranger and leaving its messages everywhere.
Lovely.
He growled, he weed, he pooed, as though there was no tomorrow. So obviously, my mum believed that Tanker was responsible for our stained step.
Okay.
She accused Tanker's owner, Babs Cardwell, of allowing her dog to do... Babs Cardwell was, I think, living with the Roonies.
Right.
It's different times.
Okay, they clearly were.
Different times.
Who
Of
knows?
allowing her dog to do what it wanted on our step. She pointed at the yellow step. Look, she shouted. I'm not doing the voice again. Look what your dog is doing. Well, Babs was furious, denied Tanker was the guilty party, and never spoke to my mum again. For years, they would pass in the street or in the co-op and look the other way, tut and huff and suck their teeth. I feel now that I've reached the grand old age of 75, says Nora. It's time to confess. This is because all the other parties are in fact dead. So,
Yeah, now that works.
it does help.
That's
doesn't
fine.
it, if you're going to send in
See what
something?
we like now, yeah.
You see, post-war, it was commonplace to give cod liver oil on a daily basis. In the dim and distant past, this was administered by the spoonful and not in capsule form. And just before leaving for school, I had to line up and my mum dolloped a spoonful of this loathsome stuff in my mouth. I absolutely hated it. Nowadays, it's a trendy supplement to take, along with St. John's wort and St. Agnes's verruca, shaved on your rocket salad and double vanilla toffee macchiatos. But in 1957, I hated this stuff with a passion. And once I had my mouthful, I rushed out of the door on my way to school and I spat it out on our step. Hence the discoloration.
Wow,
I should have said,
who knew?
should have given a warning for people.
Yes, but never mind.
This went on for quite some time, Father Simon, and I thought I got away with it. But then came Tanker, Babs, and my mum, and the Roonies, and all of that. As a result, I had to keep the cod liver oil in my mouth for longer. In fact, I had to wait until I was outside number 45. And I would spit it into their hyacinths. I still feel guilty about this action. I seek forgiveness from Tanker, poor dog who was accused, my poor mum who had to clean up the awful mess, my next door neighbour, and Babs, who was accused of not controlling a dog, although actually that was totally true. Eventually we moved house and I never had to see any of them again, but as I said, they're all dead. So surprisingly, the guilt lives on. Hopefully you'll be able to use this confession from this old age listener, says Nora. Well, Nora wins. Exactly, we've done that. We have done that because we've gone back to 1957, a rock and roll confession about a dog, a step, and cod liver oil.
Yes.
But you can buy nice little supplements. Everyone thinks, oh, it's the Mediterranean lifestyle. But back in 1957, thank you. I'll spit that on the step. Sister Susie.
Well, I do feel for you, Nora, because that was just making me feel a bit ill thinking about drinking cod liver oil. Not something I'd be interested in. However, I just can't forgive you because that poor black Labrador Tanker that got the blame, it's just not very fair. And the hyacinths at the number 45, bet they died as well.
Probably.
So, not forgiven from me, Nora. I'm really sorry.
Brother Matthew.
Well, I think Tanker was probably a bit of a bad sort, and if he wasn't doing that, he was probably doing something else. So no harm done there. And did no one else see this daughter spitting the oil out on the step? No one else thought that's a bit odd. Every time she comes out the door, she's spitting oil on the step. How bizarre. It's definitely forgiven. It's so well written. That's the reason it's getting forgiven. Very well written confession. Well done, Nora.
Plus, everyone else is dead. So
they're all dead. They're all dead.
Okay, so
Tanker.
it's the people's. Tanker's probably not with us either when you think about it.
No, he's dead.
Anyway, people's verdict,
That's
please. No dog lives from 1957 to. Tonight's confession came from Nora, and how cod liver oil was the reason that her step was changing colour. It wasn't Tanker the dog. It was Nora spitting it out. And, cod liver oil is almost certainly fine if you take it in a capsule form. I'm sure it's very good.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
But if you have to taste the stuff, excuse me and no thank you. Anyway, Nora blamed it on everybody else but her. The people's verdict is in. This is what they say.
Everyone's forgiving. Angela, forgiven. My dad used to tell my mum to give myself and my sister this disgusting stuff. We couldn't spit it out, though, as he used to make us open our mouths to prove we'd swallowed it. If it was so good for you, why didn't he take it? Chris in Cumbria, totally forgiven. Had to endure this revolting ritual every day too, and always under the guise of a good Mediterranean diet. Jerry from Western-super-Mare says, forgiven. I remember 1957, and I remember cod liver oil and senna leaves soaked in water. We had lots of things in those days which you don't have today, like rickets, diphtheria, and ringworm. And finally,
senna leaves. Would that be like cenopods? Would that be like a...
maybe. Who knows?
A thing.
Yes, a thing. And finally, John Boy says, I forgive. Nobody got hurt. All the damage was purely superfish oil.
Oh, okay.
Superfish oil.
Yes, I suppose so. So I think so. Nora, consider yourself forgiven. You also get a smart speaker, and maybe that's provoked a thought in your mind. Maybe you too can come up with a confession that can challenge for the smart speaker. So what do we get today? So it's the 1950s. It's got ruffians. It's got suspicious dogs who live next door, who take the blame. Smoking.
Yes.
Cod liver oil. Anyway, we would like a confession, and if you've got something to tell, if you have something to confess, send it to the appropriate email address, which is confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. You text 61054 once you've worked out whether there is any forgiveness on offer, yes or no. Brother Matthew's just shuffled in.
Yes, I have.
And Sister Susie's very busy producing the show, trying to sort Nigel out with his lack of Wi-Fi.
Oh, no.
Anyway, we've got his food, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Matt can just read out his script, and then that's fine. So tonight's confession comes from Ronnie. Thanks, Ronnie. Father Simon and the Confessional Collective. By the way, Ronnie gets the smart speaker. Well done, Ronnie, already. My confession is about something that happened in the early years of my career with a very well-known shipping company. I was sent to join one of the company ships as a temporary extra hand to become familiar with the way they operated before being assigned my permanent ship. A period of onboard acclimatization, getting my sea legs and so on, understanding the traditions of the ship and its crew. Just like on the BBC TV series Vigil, but without the murders.
Oh, right.
And also without the conspiracy, and also without Saran Jones. And also not underwater, obviously.
Okay. So not very much
not
like
actually
not really.
very similar. We sailed from port, and I'm wandering around, doing my best to familiarise myself with the layout of the ship and impress the captain with my keenness. I walked past a very nice wood-panelled room area. It said officers to me, classy. It said executive. I noticed what seemed to resemble a large mouse hole in one of the panels. That seems a little bit odd on a ship. On closer inspection, there appeared to be a large rodent poking its head out. No, you're imagining it, I told myself. It's new job nerves. You're hallucinating. And that's not great, is it, so early on in the job? Had I been on the lamb's rump, as advertised by the woman in the ill-fitting wetsuit? No, I had not. I looked again, and yes, there was definitely a rat's head poking out of this hole. I summoned up all my inner courage. I got closer before swiftly launching my boot in the direction of the large rodent head. A swift kick to the chops would be an impressive achievement. How many kills on your tour of duty, Ronnie? 1, albeit a rat.
Yeah.
However, I then realised that, surprise, it actually wasn't a live scary beast, but a stuffed toy, a genuine stuffed rat made in China. Well, I dragged it out, still very curious as to why it was there in the first place, in its own hole, and intending to ask one of the regular crew about my strange find. Unfortunately, I bumped into the captain, who inquired how I was finding things, to which I replied, Well, what a fine captain. What a fabulous ship it is, and so well run. Nice beard. But
Really?
I found this.
Wow.
And I held up the stuffed Roland rat toy. He laughed rather loudly, but in a still captainly, very jolly, but Admiral of the Navy kind of way, however that sounds.
Yeah.
This wasn't the reaction I expected. Then he said, "Oh, you found Roland. He's the ship's mascot. And he's been on here 8 years since the ship was built. He brings luck, he brings good fortune and prosperity to everybody. Sailors, as you know, are very superstitious, so we are very fond of him. You found him, now it's your turn to hide the blighter." So off I went, determined to find the best hiding place ever for the little furry guy. I opened a cupboard, or locker as I believe they're known on a ship, and inside there was a large open-ended pipe. "Right, Roland, my little stuffed friend, you're going up there." I began to push Roland up the pipe, intending to leave this little rodent with its head sticking out, when to my horror there was a loud sucking noise, and he disappeared. He disappeared up the pipe and was gone. Now I'm in full panic mode. I've been on this ship 1 day, and I've lost the much-loved mascot who's been there 8 years. Thinking on my feet, I sprinted up the stairs to the next level, or deck, I believe, as it's known nautically. Until you've got your sea legs. And there's a room with a sign above the door saying, "Fan room." And this was where Roland had been sucked into. All would be well.
Oh, no.
But on opening the door, my relief was short-lived. Roland wasn't there waiting to be gathered after his thrilling ride up the pipe. Instead, the room was full of a haze-like cloud consisting of millions of tiny particles of sponge and fur. Roland had been vaporized. He'd been turned into a gas. He'd gone through the fan system, and this is what had happened. I rapidly closed the door and scurried away, hoping no one else would bother to look in there, a bit like they do in the Saran Jones drama. Yeah. The next day, the banter started with, "Where's Roland? You must have hid him well. I've been looking." Because that's how sailors talk.
Yeah.
Yes, I have thought. I had hidden it very well, was what I was thinking. Anyway, this continued for a while. Not long after, Father Simon, I was transferred, leaving the rest of the crew still expecting to come across their faithful, trusty mascot hidden somewhere. Worries were beginning to be expressed, I have to say. Concerns for the well-being of the crew and the ship itself. Superstition was beginning to take over. Everyone was looking, everyone was on edge. I pretended all was well and that I'd just been extra cunning. The coxswain guessed, I think, but couldn't prove anything.
How very like. Yeah, anyway, go on.
But just like in Vigil.
Yeah.
But now seems like the right time to confess to the captain and the crew. I'm sorry, Roland isn't still in hiding. He has become a million tiny particles of nylon and polyester. But, Father Simon, we are all made of stars, aren't we?
Aren't we, though?
So that's okay, then. I'm sorry if you thought your ship was going to sink because the fairy blight had been chopped up, but it didn't, so that's okay. In a way, he was still on board the ship. In a way. In a way. Just in lots and lots of different places. So you won't be finding him anytime soon. That's what I'm saying, says Ronnie. With tonight's winning confession, let's go to Sister Susie first of all.
Oh, Ronnie, how unlucky could you be? Like, the one place you find you think is amazing, and he just gets ripped to shreds, and he's been there for 8 years. I just think it's really unlucky. You maybe should have told them, but I'm going to forgive you, because it wasn't your fault.
Brother Matthew.
Yeah, it got all a bit crystals and ley lines at the end there, didn't it? With the, is it in a way, isn't he? Isn't he still with us? Aren't we just all made of stars? And he is a gas. And I suppose the gas, that's still with us. So I'm going to forgive. Rat up a pipe always gets forgiveness in my book. So yeah, and he's hidden, so you're not supposed to see him. So that's
exactly
the whole point.
Right. Okay.
So it's all fine.
People's verdict, please. 61054. Do you forgive Ronnie? Yes or no? You start your message with Simon. But many moments ago, tonight's confession came from Ronnie. A story about how a Roland rat kind of toy. Which he thought was a real rat. Anyway, it was a very important ship's mascot, but instead of just hiding it, it got desiccated, basically, and he was just explaining what had happened, and all the ship's company can stop looking. However, sailors are quite superstitious, so let's check in with the people's verdict.
So Derek in Lemestre in Marchwood says, I forgive him, but Kevin the Gerbil doesn't. Paula, I agree with Sister Susie. Forgiven, because it wasn't his fault. And finally, forgiven, out of sight, out of mind, says Horatio. The ship didn't sink, and he's still technically on board.
Very good. So, superstition-based confessions.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Naval, merchant navy.
Keep it clean.
Yes, and I nothing to do with mice and rats, because
No.
it basically never ends well.
No.
Confessions at greatesthitsradio.co.uk. If we use your confession, you get a smart